Now that we've confirmed that we have the same spring, again, a left-hand wind spring, a counterclockwise spring, we're going to mount the new spring onto the shaft. We're just going to put it outside the tracks like this. I'm going to grab one end of the shaft, one end of the spring, and just slide it right on, and slide it all the way over to the center. I'm going to put my cable drum back onto the shaft with my set screws towards me, and I'm going to see if this shaft will slide back into the bearing, and now I'm going to slide it to the other side to gain access to the other spring. Sometimes a little persuasion helps, the hammer. And now we've got the other side free, and if we take a shot to the other side, we'll see that that is now out of the bearing, allowing us access to the spring on the left side. Now that we've got this side of the shaft free from the bearing, we're going to slide the cable drum off. We're going to slide the spring that isn't broken off. Now, we're replacing this spring even though it's not broken because the springs break from metal fatigue. And if the other spring is fatigued enough to break, this one's not far behind it. So save yourself some trouble, have your door work properly when you're finished, replace both your springs. Now we've got our new spring, and we'll see that the end of the spring goes around clockwise. So it's a right-hand spring, it's red, it's just like the old spring that we took off. So we're going to slide it onto the shaft. I'm going to slide it all the way to the center. Put my cable drum back onto the shaft just like I removed it with the set screws toward me. And you have to manipulate the shaft a little bit to get it to move. Alright, now that we've got it lined back up, we can wiggle the shaft. Okay, now that we've got the shaft back in place, we're going to slide the cable drum back over against the bearing. We're going to take our cable. We're going to lock it back into the hole in the cable drum. We're going to wrap it carefully around the cable drum. We're going to look down the side of the door and make sure it's not caught anywhere, which I've just done. We're going to pull it taut, and we're going to carefully tighten the set screws. Now you don't want to over-tighten the set screws. You want them snug, but you don't want them over-tightened or you'll leave large indentations in the torsion bar. So now that I've got that good and secure, I'm holding the cable up taut, so I grab a pair of vice grips, and I'm going to adjust the vice grips to fit the torsion bar. So it'll fit snug, not too tight, but just snug. Now I'm going to use one hand. I'm going to roll the cable up taut. I'm going to use the vice grips and clamp it onto the shaft, put them, in this case, against the ceiling. Now my cable's taut and it won't roll off the cable drum. So we're all set to go to the center of the door and bolt the springs back together. So I'm going to hold this shaft so it doesn't slide to my right. I'm going to slide the spring all the way over against the bearing plate. And it has to fit up snug to the bearing plate, and the bearing actually fits inside the spring right here. So we're going to snug that up. I'm going to bring the other spring over, and then I'm going to bolt it back together. And the springs are all back on the shaft, 2 brand new springs, tighten to the center bearing plate. Now we're ready to move over to the other cable drum. Now we're going to set the right cable drum, and we slide it over against the bearing plate. We're going to wrap our cable. We're going to put it back into the slot of the cable drum, right there. We're going to carefully roll it around the drum, making sure that it's on the proper groove. And we're going to pull this cable around taut, and again we're going to look down the side of the door and make sure the cable's not obstructed. While I hold this taut with one hand, I'm going to carefully tighten set screws. Again, being careful not to over tighten them. This cable's taut, the other cable's taut. The springs are bolted back in place. We're ready to wind the spring. Now that everything's all set, both cable drums are set, the cables are taut, the springs are bolted together in the center. We've made sure that we have the springs mounted on the proper side of the door. It's time to wind the springs. Now, one of the things that you have to know is how many turns do I put on the spring? Again, if you look on the internet, you'll find some helpful information. In this case, we're going to cheat a little bit. These cable drums are 4-inch cable drums, which means they pick up roughly 1 foot of cable per revolution. So the door we know from measuring it earlier that it's 7 feet tall. So we need 7 turns, 1 for each foot of height of the door, and then we need about another 1/2 to 3/4 of a turn to hold the door in the open position and make sure the cables stay taut. So we're roughly going to put 7.5 to 7 3/4 turns on this door. Since we're going to do it in quarter turn increments, that means we're going to put 30 to 31 quarter turns on each spring. So let's wind. We're going to start out with the rod firmly in the winding hole. We're going to pull up on the spring. No, not much tension yet. We're going to safely insert this rod into this hole. We're going to pull up. That's number 2, number 3, 9, 30. So right now we're at 7.5 turns, and you just learned that I actually can make it to 30. I can count to 30. So now that we've got 7.5 turns, you can see the spring's got some tension on it. We're going to use the other bar, and we're going to hold the rod, and we're going to tap the spring away from the center a little bit. And the reason we do that is so that as the spring is winding and unwinding when the door's opening and closing, to help keep it from binding. Now it moved on me, so I'm going to tap it up. I'm going to hold it in place.
How far do you tap it out? About 1/2 inch?
About 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Just enough stretch on the spring to help keep it from binding and making noise as the door is going up and down. So while holding the rod securely, and you never want to let go of this rod until both set screws are securely tight. Always keep your hands free in case something even brand new would break on you. Now that I've got both set screws tight, I can safely remove the rod slowly. The tension is now onto the cables. So we're going to move to the other side and tighten the other spring. Just in case for some reason I put the wrong springs on the door, or I lose count and I put too many turns on the springs, I don't want to set the second spring and have that door come flying up and knock me off the ladder. So I'm going to take a second pair of vice grips. I'm going to clamp them on the track right above the garage door roller. And that way the door won't come up once I have the spring tension on it. In case I've gotten too much tension on it, it won't come up on its own and possibly knock me off the ladder. And 30. And again, we're going to tap the spring out a little bit just to help keep it from binding. We're going to securely hold the rod, the winding rod that is, while we tighten the set screws one at a time. All right, that screw's secure. And that one's secure also. Now we can slowly and safely remove the rod. Now it's binding against here a little bit, so we'll take this other winding bar, push up just a little bit and free that and pull it out. Now we can remove the vice grips that were used to hold the cables taut. And let's go over and remove the vice grips from the garage door track and see if we've done a good job or not.